I could jam out to that one. Almost all that. Ooh, keep this one going too. Man, I could probably keep jamming to that just a little bit longer, but we've got a show to do. Good evening, everyone, and welcome once again to Conversations Cafe. I am your host, Carl Evans, Senior Director of Operations at Hope for the Day, and boy, am I excited for you to join us tonight for this episode, a Halloween edition, if you will, talking spookiness to talk about mental health. When we do our weekly episodes, of course, we're always focused on trying to create opportunities to create intersectional conversations on mental health. And we always warn about not ever being able to get the full comprehensive picture, but always taking small bites. And this is part of the bigger quest to normalize conversations on mental health, and Conversations Cafe is an excellent vehicle for that. And tonight's episode is really driving back home on one of the most core features of proactive suicide prevention work, which is trying to target and disassemble what we believe is the biggest obstacle to effective suicide prevention and mental health education, which is, in fact, a silence that's built out of stigmas. And when we think about that in realistic terms, it's not just a sort of, we're pulling things out of thin air. According to NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, in the most recent research published, they report that nearly 1 in 5 adults in America experience a mental illness. However, of those 1 in 5 identified experiencing mental illness, almost 60% of those in need of services do not seek or receive mental health treatment. There was another recent research study done by the National Center for Health Statistics and the CDC, in which surveying more than 120,000 households in America in May of this year, nearly 1 in 3 people reported depression or mental health challenges as a direct result to COVID and the pandemic. However, of those same individuals surveyed, almost 2 out of 3 individuals said that they would not or had not sought help or support for their onset of depressive-like symptoms. We have this Halloween theme today, and why we sort of titled it can be spooky to talk about mental health isn't just because it fits for the idea of Halloween as this sort of great secular time to celebrate the things that scare us, but Halloween is also a great platform for self-expression, for dressing up, for creating images, not just always scary images, sometimes tributes or homages to pop culture, history, fantasy, and so on and so forth. And we thought, what better time than to really go right in on the direct idea of the things that we don't say, the things that keep us silent. And so this episode is really trying to embrace and wrap its arms around the concepts of self-expression. And we want to have a little fun, because talking about mental health shouldn't always be a dreary and somber topic. Even though our mental health is a serious thing, the fact is that it's every facet of our life. And that also includes the joy and delight and wondrous things that we share in our life, not just always talking about the ways in which mental health can harm us. So it seemed really consistent with our goals that today, when we talk about this being a special episode, you're going to notice a little things a little bit different. We have a group of guests joining us tonight who are absolutely here to talk about mental health, but they're also here to sort of celebrate their own self-expression. We asked that folks from the Hope for the Day community at large join us, and with the one rule that if they're going to be on camera, they have to be dressed up. So I'm the dry one tonight as the host, but we're going to be running a little bit of a costume contest for those who joined us on screen. They're going to be winning a $50 gift card from a select panel of judges who will be our sort of like MCs of the night, or rather our sort of guests of honor. And as we go through our fun little program this evening, we're going to create an opportunity to talk about issues and times where we felt silenced by the sort of stigmas in the world. And that's going to be different for everyone, because when we talk about stigma and things we don't say, that's really a different intersection for each human being, because it can come from culture and social factors that try to dictate how we express ourselves. And that's never just one linear scale. When we talk about stigma, you shouldn't think of it as just a buzzword in which it's just one overriding sort of set of things that you could put on a map, things that you could put as one set definition for what stigma is. Stigma is ultimately the things that we don't say. So that can be impacted by your gender, your ethnicity, your geography, your economic status, by a whole number of different things. So we're going to really sort of have an opportunity to talk about that and explore it. Before we go any further, though, I want to bring our sort of guests of honor on, and who we're going to be serving as our costume judges tonight, for we have a little costume contest going on. And they're also part of programming this evening, because there's a few different segments that we wanted to present to you. So before I go any further, let's make sure we can see and hear our judges panel, if you will. That's going to be Mia Park. Can we see you? Can we hear you? Hello, Mia.
Hello, 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 hello.
There's Skylar. Skylar, how you doing?
Hi.
Thank you for joining us. Let's see, we're gonna get Sadie. Sadie, can we hear you? Can we see you?
Hi.
Howdy, Sadie. Thank you for joining us. And Dave. Dave, can we see you? Can we hear you?
Hey, everyone.
So before we get going, please introduce yourselves, because we're going to have quite a few other guests joining us, and they're going to talk about themselves a little later in the episode. But let's have folks meet you first. Starting with Mia.
Sure. Hi, my name is Mia Park, and I am so honored to be back with Hope for the Day. So I met Hope for the Day because I host a TV show called Chic-A-Go-Go. There's a puppet. We've been doing it for a long time. Although, I don't know what goes on with COVID anymore. But anyway, Mike and Hope for the Day co-sponsored a show we did at the Chop Shop. We have puppet, bands lip sync. It was Mike's band that lip synced, and then kids dancing. And we had a nice little health and wellness fair. So for me, I do a lot of things. I'm a yoga teacher, meditation teacher. I'm an actress, and I run an Asian American theater production company, Our Perspective Asian American Plays. And I'm very lucky to be alive and know all of you.
Thank you so much for joining us, Mia. And did you want to give us any insight into your costume expression tonight?
Well, if you're talking about insights, every Halloween, no matter whether I'm wearing a costume or not, I like to wear my third eye on my sleeve, so to speak, on my face. We all have this inner sight, and I just think making it a little obvious, it's just to help us all out. And myself. Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us. Thank you so much for joining us. Next up, we have Sadie. Sadie.
Hi, guys. I'm Sadie Strong. I am a Navy veteran, and I came to Hope for the Day through actually Project R.E.D team. I am currently a home baker. I started my own little small business, and I'm a body positivity model, working usually with R.E.D. And I just am super glad to be here and show you guys some cool stuff.
So glad to have you. Thank you for joining us, Sadie. And Skylar.
Hi guys, I'm Skylar. Thank you guys for having me back on. So I'm just a music industry professional here in Chicago. So I do a bunch of other things. You'll see later. I love to play with makeup and stuff like that. And I love to talk about self-expression and stuff like that.
Thank you for joining us. And last but not least, Dave. Who are you, Dave?
Hey, everyone. I'm Dave. I'm usually the guy behind the camera. So my day job, I am the executive director of Hope for the Day. But sometimes at night, it's good to be in front of the camera once in a while. And pleasure to be on such an esteemed panel with all three of you, Mia, Skylar, and Sadie. Heard so much about you, and thank you for being such huge advocates for us at Hope for the Day, and very excited to be allowed to wear a mask with all of you one night.
Wayne's World, Wayne's World, Wayne's World.
Excellent.
Party on, Dave. Party
Excellent.
On. Very cool. So I promised myself I wouldn't do too many Halloween puns. So I'm only going to say ghoul-tastic at least once tonight, but that will not, because I did not know what people were going to be dressing up tonight. So having Dave as Wayne's World gives me a whole nother avenue of quote and quotables. So thank you, Dave, again for doing that. So let me explain how this episode's going to go. We've got some phenomenal people who are from the Hope for the Day family and organization. Specifically, we wanted to have our staff members and people who work with Hope for the Day's largest outreach program, Sip of Hope, the coffee shop we launched 2 years ago in Logan Square, which is still operating with adjustments for the pandemic, the world's first coffee shop where 100% of the proceeds go to support proactive suicide prevention. So between that and Hope for the Day as an internal organization, we invited our team members and interns and anyone in the family to come on dressed up. So you will notice in this episode, we have a very large, almost panel will be joining us. If I could ask our guests to come on screen, we're going to be meeting you all a little bit later, but I think it's an appropriate time to just sort of open up the party doors and let some of y'all jump in right now. So, I love it. One of the things that's going to be happening tonight is a costume judging contest. We wanted to celebrate people's expressions, and you're all coming from different places. You know, if Christmas and Angel and Rick wanted to jump on too, you're welcome. And there's going to be a voting done by the judges that you just met. However, for all of our guests tonight, and for you watching right now, this is for you watching currently on Thursday night, October 29th. So if you're listening to the podcast and days after, this contest will discontinue. We have a little bit of a survey poll asking you different questions about mental health. So you're going to see, for our guests on camera right now, you're going to see a little survey poll come up, and we'll ask you to be filling that out as we continue on with the show. And then if you're watching right now on Facebook or YouTube, you're going to see a link pop up to answer the survey question as well. We're going to be reading the results for the final segment of this episode, where we're going to be talking very much about mental health and the things that keep us silent, obviously. But before we go further, we wanted to talk a little bit about self-expression. And Sadie introduced herself as being someone who connected to Hope for the Day from something called Project R.E.D team. And as you look at Hope for the Day, when I talked about stigma and the things we don't say, and it being things that connect to your personal cultures and social intersections, we realize that, as our founder, Johnny Boucher, is always saying, we've got to meet people where they are and not where we expect them to be. Oh my goodness. Seeing more costumes. And one of the truths about that is, in order to break the silences around stigma, we have to have authentic, organic conversations, meaning that we've got to be able to speak the truth and not just give BS or just think of it as a generic commercial. Project R.E.D team is something that Hope for the Day we call an educational variant. It's a platform to meet very specific populations in their own language, in their own words, and empowering advocates and surrogates to go into their own communities and press those conversations. Sadie is a member of Project R.E.D team, which focuses on individuals who make the commitment to serve the safety and health of their communities. These are people who go out and are deployed, and that is both military, that's first responders, that's people who work in any sort of community stewardship level dedication. And as Sadie mentioned, of course, she is a veteran. And one of the things that we talk about is embracing self-expression and creating outlets for the things that impact us. So we've got a wonderful little demo video we wanted to share with you from a part of our community. Sadie, why don't you prep us for what we're about to watch?
Hi, yeah. So as I said before, I own Stay Delicious as my cookie brand. And I always find it fun, especially during COVID, that, I used to have a lot of pop-ups and things like that, and people would come and buy cookies, or we'd have classes. And sadly, I can't get with all the people to do classes. So lately I've been doing these fun little online tutorials, given the time. So what I did was just made like a quick little, quick little spooky cookies, and showed you like a quick TikTok version of how you do it. So enjoy.
Thank you very much.
tell you to run. On my way. On my way. Know what to say about the young. On my way. On my way. Pick me up with golden hands. I'm gonna see you. I'm gonna tell you to run.
Beautiful. That was awesome. And if you are watching it, we'll make sure that that video will be available on our social media. If you check out, especially our Facebook pages as well. And Sadie, thank you so much for putting that together. We're always explaining, because of the way stigma can keep people silent on mental health, we like to introduce people to the concept of thinking of your mind and your mental health like a bottle of soda that can build up with pressure. And the pressure can come from things that we're born with genetically or things that we experience externally. And these pressures can build, and we have to sort of find valves to release that pressure. And if we can't find valves on our own, that's the sign to go and get professional help. But talking about personal valves that we control, do you look at that baking and things like that? Obviously, you're doing it by profession, but do you consider baking as a sort of an outlet for you, something that sort of gives you a sense of peace on your mental health?
Yeah, I've always been super artsy to begin with. And I remember when I was actually getting out of the military, I was just finding myself doing a lot more just artwork within baking. I did cupcakes for a little bit. I tried to make candy, and then just cooking and baking with cookies just kind of stuck. And I just feel like I'm in my own little, it was just an outlet for me. And then I enjoy it. So now I just like to share it with everyone else.
Phenomenal. And that's great. And I want to sort of, even though we're going to be meeting our guests, our costume contestants formally in a few minutes, quick show of hands, because when we talk about self-expression and valves, painting, dancing, singing, these creative endeavors are certainly outlets. But who would say that they have outlets that are like that, or other things that they use to sort of give them a sense of control and outlets for their own mental health? Who thinks they utilize different sorts of valves, whether it's baking or something else? So that's something, we all share in common, and we'll probably be asking our costume contestants what one of their go-to valves is when we get to that portion. Thank you so much for sharing one of your valves, Sadie, and obviously one of your endeavors as well.
Of course, thank you.
Well, it's our pleasure. And it also brings us over to another platform, because talking about self-expression, people may have a hard time being able to appreciate the value of doing something, especially when you're not in the moment of crisis. But daily maintenance is a way of sort of normalizing mental health conversations as well, by being mindful that you're doing something to take care of yourself and not just waiting till you're unwell to pay attention to yourself. And that brings us to another self-expression platform where we have a great video from Skylar. And Skylar, could you sort of share with us what we're about to watch?
Hi. So I like to, obviously, I've talked to you guys before about it, to like self-express myself in the way I look, in the way I dress and stuff like that, and makeup's kind of included. So I have been playing around with like Halloween makeup. So you're gonna see a video of me like going through a tutorial of recreating like the crying heart tattoo that everyone has, but as like a Halloween makeup. Hello and welcome to my Halloween makeup tutorial. So here I'm just taking a face primer and rubbing it all over my face just to start a great base for the makeup that we're going to be using today. From there, I'm just taking my everyday foundation and just putting it all over my face, making sure I get everywhere, and I'm really focusing on the outside of my face, so my neck and like my hairline, because that's going to be crucial for this look. You're going to see your normal skin on the outside, so just making sure it's all there, and then it's also going to help create a great base for the rest of the makeup that we're going to be putting on later. Then from there, I'm just taking an Elmer's glue stick to cover up my brows. This is just so I can draw my brows back on a little bit higher to create a little bit more space for the eye makeup that we're going to be doing. This is totally not a necessary step, but if you feel comfortable doing it, it's pretty fun. It's pretty easy. I have really thin brows, so it doesn't take too much for me. Just running the glue stick through my brows and then spooling them upwards so they lay flat to my skin. Then I'm just taking my foundation once again and just doing something like a nude or a light brown so it's easy to wipe away any of your mistakes, and that way we can create a great outline for the shape that we're going to be doing. So I'm just drawing a heart and so then I'm also just going to go through my brows one more time with that glue stick just to make sure they're nice and glued down and perfect for our makeup. I'm also just going to take a translucent setting powder and just make sure my brows are all nice and dry, as well as putting that over the rest of my face, just so the makeup that we ended up doing earlier doesn't move or crease while we are doing this look. Then from there, we're going to do the fun part. I'm just taking a cream paint. This one I got out of a NYX Flash palette, but any good old Halloween makeup will do. You could even take a lipstick mixed with your foundation if you want to get really crafty, and just filling in that heart. So I'm just taking a beauty blender. I'm using one that's different than the one I put my foundation on, so I can just throw it away after I'm done with this look, since it's going to be stained pink, and we're just going to fill in that heart. And then from there, I'm just taking a concealer brush and just going to define the actual shape so it's not messy and I don't have to go back and clean it up. And just going in with that cream paint and outlining the heart so it's filled in better. Then from there, I'm just taking a pink eyeshadow out of a palette that I don't use anymore, since we're going to be using a little bit of it, just to set that cream paint so it doesn't crease throughout the day. Wherever you're wearing it, a cream paint's usually going to crease on your skin. So just making sure you set it with a similar color will make sure it looks nice throughout the day. Then from there, I'm just taking a white cream paint and putting it underneath my eyes just to give myself a highlight, so it makes me look more dimensional, awake, and less like I just drew a giant shape on my face. And then from there, I'm just going to start doing my eyeshadow. So I'm just taking a deep red shade and just doing a basic smoky eye. I'm also taking a little bit of a black just so it shows up a little bit better against that pink cream paint, and just blending it out and just doing a super basic smoky eye. It doesn't have to be perfect since you're not going to see too much of it with the cream paint. And then I'm just taking an eyeliner and drawing on some very sad looking brows. I'm really just trying to get a good shape here because I am going to take an eyeshadow and a cream paint after it to fill it in. Then I'm just taking a little bit of blush, so I have a super deep red and I'm putting that on the heart, and then I'm just also bronzing out my rest of my face like I normally would, just to create dimension in the face. Then I'm just going back in with a little bit of eyeshadow and some glitter, and doing the same on the bottom. From there, I'm just going to do my basic winged liner how I usually do. If you're not used to doing wing liner, any type of makeup look that you normally do would be absolutely fantastic for this look because you want to look like yourself, but you're a crying heart. Then I'm just putting on mascara, nothing too exciting here. And then after I do my mascara, I'm gonna put on some false lashes just for some dramatic effect. Totally optional, but very fun. Then I'm just gonna put on some black lipstick, just to create some dimension in my lips, as well as to go along with the eye look as well as the brows. And then here comes the fun part, which is totally optional. Once you've completed this look, feel free to put anything around the heart. Eyeliner would look really cool. If you have some craft pearls, those would also be super awesome. But I'm just taking some eyelash glue and slowly outlining the heart. And then I have some crystals that I found in the craft section of Amazon. And I'm just going to attach those to my face in a heart shape. So this is just going to add a little bit more of dimension into the heart, so it actually looks a little bit more like a heart, and give you that really classic crying heart tattoo look. This also takes absolutely forever, and my camera died during this, so you won't get to see the full part, but I'm sure you get the whole idea. And we're just switching to some good old iPhone video because my camera battery died and I just could not wait long enough to take those eyelashes off. But yeah, super easy, a lot easier than I thought this look was gonna be, and I think that anyone could totally take care of this look easy peasy.
Love it. Golf clap. So one of the important things is as we're doing programming is always asking about, what's the impact and what's the point sometimes, especially for folks who maybe are wanting to be supporters of conversations in mental health. Not everything that we do and talk about seems to have a one-to-one translation. But Skylar, I think what's fascinating, and again, thank you so much for sharing this passion with us, is, I think when we think of the idea of stigma creating masks for us, there's something that maybe it's a pretty obvious, not metaphor, but a pretty obviously correlation between this idea of using makeup to create different sorts of expressions for yourself and develop, whether it's like your day-to-day makeup or applications that are far more dramatic and expressive. And I was just wondering sort of, where do you find that connection with those and that sort of makeup endeavors, right?
Yeah, I think it's like such a tough question to like answer. Like I feel like my thing is like it's something that like I feel comfortable with doing and like expressing myself with. Like I've done makeup for so long and I've always thought it was like super interesting. But I'm also just so inspired by like other people who do it. And like I feel like I'm always scrolling through Instagram. I'm like, oh my God, that person did such a cool like painting or something like that. And then I can take that and like my own art form, I guess. Like I obviously like can draw or read or write and all of that stuff, but like that's something that like I am like confident in my skills in. So like taking that and like finding inspiration from other people, or like even in the sense that like instead of like locking myself in a room to like paint or draw for the day, I can just like sit down at my desk and just like play with makeup and like paint.
Thank you for sharing that. And that's really important to understand, that what connects for us may not necessarily be something that everyone else has to share for it to give us a sense of completeness. And I wanted to also draw attention to the fact that if you consistently tune in for Conversations Cafe, we run a series called Body Modifications, which explores these different ways in which people sort of find ways to connect their mental health and sense of identity to external expressions, whether it's for the general public or themselves. And we hear body modifications and maybe think of exclusively tattoos and piercings, but makeup for use is definitely a way in which people can shape and create, and affirm and express themselves. And this is all part of the game when we talk about mental health. We're trying to communicate the internal experience, our thoughts, feelings, and emotions. And why it can be spooky and scary to talk about these things is because right on the face of it, the sense of vulnerability, even beyond the idea that people might be afraid of judgment and things like that, just being vulnerable inherently is terrifying and is a consistent, horror movie that plays in all of our minds oftentimes, right? So I can't thank you enough for sharing that. And we hope to have you on again for other body modifications. And that brings us into bringing our community into the conversation here as well. So has everyone who's on camera right now had a chance to fill out the survey? So what we're going to be doing, please take a moment if you haven't yet. We're going to be doing a little bit of a fireside scary stories. We're going to be asking people at their own discretion to share perhaps a time where they have felt themselves silenced by stigmatizing behaviors and things like that. But before we go into that part, I would like to introduce all of our on-camera costume contestants so that our judges can begin evaluating and voting as we start discussion on mental health. So we're going to go in the order that I see you on my panel. And then what I would like you to do is introduce yourself, how you connect to Hope for the Day, what your costume is, and just for ish and giggles, so we don't get struck in from YouTube, just for ish and giggles, tell us one of your favorite go-to valves, okay? So we're going to start with, we have Matt Fuchs. You're up first. Who are you, sir?
Good evening. Hello. I am Dracula, getting ready for the weekend, yeah? And I moonlight as the director of finance for Hope for the Day. And what was the last question, Carl? I zoomed out a little bit.
Well, Drac, what's your go-to self-expression valve? At least one.
Staying out of the sunlight and playing music.
All right. I love it. Next up, well done. Thanks for joining us, Drac. Next, we've got on screen, it says Bev. Who are we?
So I'm Bev. I work in policies and partnership at Hope for the Day. So I am Stitch. I realize my head's not big, so you can't see his eyes. But I could look like Eeyore, I realize. So, but yeah. And I enjoy hiking.
Fantastic. And to be clear, you are Stitch of Lilo and Stitch?
Yes.
Okay. I definitely thought you were Eeyore, though. No joke.
Yeah.
All right. Mr. Rose and the Witch.
That's us. I was like, who are they talking to? I'm David Rose from Schitt's Creek, and this is a witch.
That's not very nice.
Yeah.
You know, so that's it. Oh, also,
who are you and what is your vow?
I am the education director at Hope for the Day when I'm not dressed as David Rose, and we get to do a lot of wonderful intersectional conversations every week with multiple opportunities to get educated in proactive suicide prevention and mental health education. And Erin is one of the original SIP baristas, SIP of Hope. She's also my wife. We're married.
And yeah, one of
What's your
my valves is my pets and gardening.
Love it. Thank you all for joining us. Next up, Nicole Summers.
Hello.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're gonna mute.
So I definitely wore this often because I am also a CPS teacher and I wear this when I teach. And I hear that my RBG accent sounds like a British woman, so I'm not gonna do it. The kids have shamed me for it. But I'm Nicole. I am the notorious RBG, one of my sheroes. And this is so exciting. I am one of the instructors for Hope for the Day's program called Breathe for Hope, which is a yoga and mindfulness class that myself and my friend Britt, who's somewhere on here somewhere, we started. So I'm very excited to be here, and I love this all, and I love you guys. And yay, go be quality.
Thank you for joining us. Next up, Dex. Good to see you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dex Howell. I am a Twitch streamer and also an agent of impact for Hope for the Day. I think the valve for me is totally streaming. I get to talk to people from everywhere, and I get to share not only the games that I'm playing, but the message of Hope for the Day, that it's okay not to be okay. And I find that there's a lot of people that they just vibe with the message. They have fun playing the games that we do. They are very supportive of each other, and it's just it grows. The community has grown so much. We did a 24-hour stream where we raised so much money for Hope for the Day. It was $1,200. That was in the month of June. It was great. It was a fantastic thing to see so many people come together. It was a lot of fun. And my costume is Naruto Uzumaki from the series Naruto. It's an anime.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dex. This is my first time actually seeing Dex on camera, so we've been corresponding, but good to see you, man. Christmas. Ribbit.
Yes, Christmas is actually my pet lizard. She cannot speak. She has recently eaten some carrots and she has indigestion and she cannot speak. She will be banished. And she is the senior director of workplace mental health, I believe, at the Hope for the Day. One of her events is dancing, and she is excellent in mime work. Yes.
Phenomenal. Thanks, Drax. Drac, for the introduction. Ribbit for joining us. We've got Billy Ray and Ilio.
Hello guys, I'm Angel. I work on the marketing and events team for Hope for the Day, and I'm Elio from the movie Call Me by Your Name. And that's my cat. His name is Oliver, so we're Elio and Oliver. And I am Billy Ray Cyrus. I got my cowboy boots on and my mustache and my mullet, looking fresh. I am Hope for the Day social media coordinator, and my valve is reading books. My valve is playing piano, and Billy Ray's valve is writing music.
Man, my achy breaky heart is just laughing with joy for that. That's phenomenal. Next, we've got Becca.
Hello, I am Hope for the Day's marketing and events director. I am also Sandy from Greece. And I would say my valve is art in general, painting, ceramics, anything like that. So a couple new hobbies this quarantine.
Phenomenal. Well, thank you so much, Sandy and Becca, for joining us. Britt.
Hi, everybody. My name is Britt Kaplan, and I'm one of the co-founders of Hope for the Day's Yoga Mindfulness Experience, Breathe for Hope. And I'm Cookie Monster. I don't know if you could tell, to gobble up the stigma. And one of my outlets is dancing.
Thank you so much, Rick.
Hi, I am Rick Osowski. I am a podcast producer here at Hope for the Day and a surrogate, as well as a podcast host of my own. And I don't really have a name for this costume, but I guess we could call it the unbearable stigma of mental health. And so one of my main valves is anything related to the card game Magic the Gathering, whether it's in paper, which we can't do now due to COVID, or online. So those are most of my valves.
Unbearable stigma. I love it. Well, thank you all for joining us. And thank you for going through the effort of creating a wonderful series of costumes. We are so thrilled, especially in the pandemic time. It's going to be hard for people to get together for in-person costume parties. So I think this counts as at least one of the social gatherings for the season. Right now, our judges are going to be given a poll that they can take their time to marinate on and consider. And while they look at the voting for that one, we're going to look at a poll that was issued to our on-camera guests earlier in the episode, and to a different extent, we also published a link to a poll that if you're watching right now on Thursday night, October 29th, for those who may be engaged in the podcast in later days. We also sent out a survey poll that you could click on asking about if you've ever felt silenced. It was a yes or no question to the general public. If you'd ever felt silenced by someone on your mental health. And we had a resounding response of nearly 80% of all those who responded to that poll online said yes. Let's look at, we asked a few different questions, a little more nuanced questions for our on-camera guests. And this is where we're going to sort of take the rest of the discussion for the day before we announce the winner of the contest. Think of this as sort of, we're all gathered around the campfire. If we could pull up that survey, the survey results. If we were thinking ourselves around the campfire, you know, telling scary ghost stories and things like that, what I asked our guests was, have you ever felt silenced by someone on mental health? And it doesn't have to be nefarious. It doesn't have to be malicious, like a 1980s movie bully being like, hey, you can't talk about your mental health. But the way stigma works in our communities, oftentimes people unintentionally do things that make us silent, because the way stigma works is that misunderstandings on mental health have been inherited. They were here long before Facebook and social media, long before most of us were ever born. We've inherited for generations upon generations misunderstandings and basically bad information on how mental health works. Typically illusions, believing that mental health is something that is entirely 100% about our willpower to control, as opposed to being a combination of dealing with genetics or psychological injuries that require healing in the same way we think of healing a broken bone or a sprained ankle. And it's not just enough when we talk about mental challenges that people have to just think happy thoughts or just get over something. It can oftentimes take intensive work to work through intensive mental challenges. And even if somebody doesn't fit or match a criteria for a diagnosable illness, on a day-to-day basis, we can all experience things that can dramatically disrupt our quality of life on a day-to-day scale. And managing those things, if we don't feel safe to talk about them, those issues can oftentimes exasperate and escalate to bigger and bigger problems, because talking is a very powerful valve. It may not remove an issue that's given us trouble, but being able to valve out the pressure can recenter our minds and give us space to try to work through and process an issue in a healthy outcome. So are we able to look at that poll? If we can do a screen share, I don't know if it's visible.
Oh, I'm just sharing it with the attendees right now, is what it's telling me. This is my first time working with polls, and let me just say, ew. Well, let me see. I'll try to share this and see if it works, but it might be weird Inception stuff going on, you know?
Which we can, I can live with.
Let me see here. We'll try it out.
While they're pulling that up, I gotta ask Dex, what kind of camera are you using? Because you're a professional streamer. And I'm just like, I'm seeing like the microorganisms on your wall. Like you've got some good resolution going on.
It does look really good.
So actually, I'm only using webcam. It's a
don't say
Logitech.
that.
I'm not joking. It's a C9 22X.
What? I have the same exact thing. What are you doing with yours?
I have all the lights turned off, and there's a ring light in front of me.
Can you? Oh, it's the lighting. Okay.
It's the lighting. Yeah, the lighting
makes
a huge difference.
Okay. Yeah.
Lighting makes a huge difference for sure.
I don't know if I want good lighting because it's a little. Okay, that's good. But you looking wonderful. You all look lovely, by the way. I'm just want to bring that up. So, Mike, if we can't pull that up, just to keep rocking and rolling, could you?
Yeah, I can't actually share it to the stream, but you can read off some of the results, or I can read off some of the results.
Yes, please. Could you start with the first question? What was that first question was?
Have you ever been too scared to tell someone about a mental health challenge? And there was 17% said yes, once. 83% said, OMG, many times. And then 0 said never. So that's good. That's kind of affirms what we all kind of feel. Number 2, has someone else's behavior or attitudes on mental health ever made you stay silent? A resounding 100% yes. 3, Was that person, and this is a multiple choice question, was that person a boss? 42% people said boss. 58% of people said a coworker. 83% of people said a friend. 92% of people said a family member. And then about 58% said a total stranger. So stigma across the board. Ew, ew.
Thank you very much for reading those results. And what I want everyone who's listening right now to take home with them as we go into this discussion is to realize that it's easy to just think that stigma is something that's just exclusively like the cartoonish, somebody like verbally saying very abusive and hostile things. That should stop, and we don't want that to be there. But I want people to be mindful of the ways in which it's a little more passive. And that's why I was hoping we could have people share their stories. So for our on-camera guests, you will see in your chat box, you have the option to raise your hand. If you'd like to maybe share an experience, because I don't want to put anyone on the spot who doesn't feel comfortable talking. If you would like to put your hand up and share an experience of when you felt stigmatized, if you can get down to the specific instance, I would love to see those come up and I'll call on you. If you're watching right now, or even if you engage in this in future days, if you were to hashtag Hope for the Day and tag us and share a time where you felt stigmatized, that would be an excellent conversation to continue to have both in our digital communities and more than just tonight. And I'll just, as an example, I'll just kick off things. One of the things that I would have responded is, yes, I felt stigmatized. And one of the examples that I would give is that I was working in domestic construction, so housing, working on a house in construction. And someone had just, as will happen, they dropped a heavy load and it didn't really injure them. It kind of fell on they dropped a heavy load of a gear and it fell on their foot and they were just cussing things out. But the person had been having like a really bad day. And so this was like the last straw, and it was about lunchtime. It was just the last straw. And they they dropped this load, it hit their foot, no bones were broken. They're perfectly fine, but they just flipped out and just angry and, just sort of stomped off to their car, and they were kind of hiding tears as they went along. And I knew the individual, and I knew that they had a very impactful series of events happening to them over a couple of days. They'd had some financial issues, and there had been a loss of life of the passing of a cousin that none of the other coworkers, none of the other people on the job knew about. Okay, so people saw this person walking away and had all these things and kind of hiding their tears. And the response from the management, from the manager levels down to the other coworkers was like, they basically, call them some very derogatory words, like, oh, what a punk, what a other stronger words that I'll, for YouTube or Facebook censorship, won't say right now. And what that did to me was basically, as I've lived with persistent mental health challenges from time to time, what it did for me is it just said, these people don't necessarily, they see it in a masculine level. They're not going to be able to connect with mental health issues. And for me, that would have manifested in maybe needing to call off of work on a day that I might have been struggling. And I just knew automatically that I was not going to be calling in and saying like I needed a mental health day. I needed to, I was feeling a little depressed. That was not going to be something I was ever going to remotely attempt with this crew, so long as I was getting a paycheck from that job. And so that's an example. It wasn't necessarily that somebody was picking on me or something like that. It was just seeing the sort of attitudes and responses to someone's own self-expression. And it was very masculine based. So I just knew, don't say anything about the mental health. That wasn't going to be sensitively approached. So that's a quick example. If anyone else wants to put their hands up now, I would encourage you to, if you look in your chat box, you'll see raise your hand. It's
Sadie,
blue.
Nicole.
Mike, you're seeing them. I'm sorry. I guess I forgot I'm not host anymore.
Good.
So please, Mike, call out as they come.
Skylar's first, then we're going to go Sadie and Nicole.
Phenomenal. All right. Step right up.
Okay, so I kind of am going off of yours. I definitely multiple times, and this has happened to me so many times, whether it's at work or an internship, like I'm just having a bad day. I try and push through it. I think a lot of us do, but so many times I've had like people kind of say, well, so and so has it worse, or well, you're here to get paid, so maybe just put it behind you, and stuff like that happens to me so often. Especially in the past when I was still like learning how to, cope with things and how to talk about them. And like, I think all of us can experience this too, that, we go to work and we're just having a bad day. And I'm lucky enough to have great coworkers now where I can be like, I am totally having a terrible day. Like, can you be easy on me or stuff like that? But I've definitely been in that position where someone's like, well, so-and-so, or the whole like kids are starving in Africa, you don't have it that bad type of story. And that just makes it so hard to be like, hey, I'm having a bad day. And that's like bosses and coworkers. And I've even had family members tell me that, where I'm like, I don't want to go into work today. And they're like, well, it's your job and other people have it worse. And it's hard to go through that. And it makes you want to stay silent when you experience that a lot.
Skylar, thank you so much for sharing that. And real quickly, before we go to our next speaker, for folks who are listening, folks joining us right now, that kind of a thing is called minimization. And being dismissive of someone's mental health challenges or any personal experiences. This isn't the Pain Olympics. So your personal challenges shouldn't have to be validated by measuring them to others. And I'm glad that you brought that up. Real quick, show of hands, anyone ever felt like they've had their experiences minimized? Even if you're going to share a story about that right now, thank you for sharing that, Skylar, because that's a thing people go through that it's hard to talk about. So thank you. Mike, who's next?
Sadie Strong.
Hi. Yeah. So I guess just when we were talking about earlier about how in the poll where you have a stigma that, talking to strangers or who it was that you felt uncomfortable with. And for me, weirdly, for my mental health, whenever I am expressing myself, I've always been more comfortable with strangers. Oddly, I think it's more of, I've always had a really supportive family growing up. And I had a very stable, like, mom and dad, and I saw no issues. Like, if they had any type of mental health thing or argument, it was not done in front of me. So it's just always, now being a parent myself, I like hold that almost. So I don't know if like any other parent can like relate with this, but I just always feel like, okay, I can't go to my mom for any type of mental health thing, or if I'm feeling too stressed or I have really bad anxiety and I suffer, I have anxiety and depression, and it's a lot with kids. And I feel like sometimes I put it on myself where I can't go to my mom or my parents because they're going to be like, what are you doing? Like, you're a parent now, you can't have these feelings. So that's like always that's my thing right now, is being like, okay, like I can tell anybody about this. I'll tell the whole internet, but I'm not going to tell my personal family.
Wow, that's so heavy, because that's something that can build inside of you. It's very toxic in the sense that we think we're supposed to be perfect illustrations for people, and there's chances are your parents could have concealed that from you, thinking that was for the best. And we see school teachers who feel that way, people who are in roles of leadership. So it's amazing that you can talk about that. Thank you so much, Sadie. That's definitely a topic we're going to need to explore more as we continue with these episodes. So who's next, Mike?
Nicole Summers.
Nicole.
Hey, can you hear me? Am I good? Okay. So I wanted to just bring, like, as far as stigma goes, I think what's difficult sometimes to navigate, and like currently what I've been navigating for years, is the two people that love me the most, my parents. It is sometimes difficult to, I'm not sure if it's a generational thing or if it's, my dad telling me to pull it up by my bootstraps, like, you're fine, there's no problems. And I think they also, when I express to my parents, like, oh, like, I'm going to therapy, or I'm, having difficulties with these feelings, they immediately are like, take offense to it, like my childhood wasn't good or something, like they did something wrong. And I try to like tell them, like, no, like, it's just, this is, who I am. This is part of the process. And sometimes it's difficult to talk to the people that are closest to you, because, they may take it personal, or they may, you know, like it's just difficult for them to wrap their heads around. And I think too, because for so long they were also silenced. And it was, you know, that's something that they are not comfortable talking about. So that's been a conversation that I've been having with my parents and being more open with them and then being more open with me with how they're feeling. Because I know that they, you know, we've all got our things and I want them to be, you know, able to express that and not see it as a weakness.
Wow, that's a great, you know, continuation from where Sadie was talking about. Sometimes the people who love us the most and we love the most, sometimes they can be not necessarily the most productive allies and connections because of those ideas and pedestals that we put up around ourselves. So again, these are such critical conversations that we should be aware of, because these are the more realistic things that are probably impacting our lives on a day-to-day basis beyond diagnosed illnesses, which is a feature for a lot of people. But if you never have had a diagnosis, chances are your mental health can still be directly impacted by these relationship links, you know, behaviors. So next up we have Billy Ray and Elio.
Elio. Thank you, Carl. So I am a really big crier. I cry a lot. Even when I'm not sad, if I'm like angry or like happy, I just like cry. And so that was prevalent a lot in my childhood. And sometimes my family wouldn't understand that I was like crying out of frustration. So I would often get made fun of for crying, being like, oh, you're being so weak. And so that would make me want to isolate myself and not talk about, you know, the emotions I was dealing with, because I just didn't want to get made fun of. So that's a common one I've had to deal with.
Yeah, and kind of piggybacking off that too, I think it's strange, not strange, but seeing all of us kind of have the same experiences with like our family, especially. I know for me, like I grew up in a family that like we didn't talk about feelings. Like we barely said I love you. We don't really hug that much. And I can see that now, me being an adult, how that has like bled into me being an adult, but I've kind of like learned how to talk about my feelings. And now you can't get me to stop. But like growing up, for sure, it impacted, especially like being a teenager and like with my friends. And like I often got told by my friends that like, oh, Macy never cries, or like, oh, she's kind of heartless. But it was like, no, I just grew up like not talking about those kinds of things. But yeah, about mine.
Beautiful. And I want to make time. Just we'll take one more if anyone has one. I don't know. Like, were there any other hands that came up? I don't want to cut anyone off. We've got Britt and oh, the chest hair. That's great. We want to acknowledge we're talking about the chest hair Macy drew on there. And I want to make time before we go to announce the results of our costume selection. I'd also like to ask our judges if they wanted to share something as well. Leave that space open. But was there any other hands up, Mike? Maybe I saw Britt. We take, you know, we write our own rules. I see Aaron. We write our own rules, so I mean, we stay as long as we want, but just for time, you know, time management, we'll sort of. So we'll go Britt and Aaron.
Why don't we go with Britt, and then we'll go to the lovely witch beside me.
Yes, yeah, let's do that.
Hi, everybody. So yes, unfortunately, you know, stigma is a huge thing that, you know, I've encountered in many aspects of my life, and I didn't even realize at the time that I kind of felt silenced. And I want to relate to what Skylar said in terms of, you know, and what Carl said in terms of work. I'm also a special education teacher, and you know, I have type 1 diabetes, I have a plethora of autoimmune disorders, and I felt like I had to keep that silent in the workplace. And even though it affects me day in and day out, and also affects, you know, my anxiety and depression, and I've never talked to an administrator about that, or my, you know, not really my coworkers, because I felt like I couldn't really. And this year, especially with the pandemic, I kind of threw that away. And I'm very open with my administration about how I'm doing with my mental and physical health. And I said, you know what, I'm just going to be straight up with them, see how they react, and we'll go from there. And I'm really happy with the decision that I made to actually be upfront with them about it. And I know that it's tough and a lot of people feel like they can't, but I encourage everybody to just see what happens.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Britt.
All right.
Proud of you, by the way.
Me too. And I want to just gobble up all the stigma too. Gobble stigma. All right.
Thanks.
I would say, I mean, I would, as long as everybody was talking about parents, it made me think about how, you know, like my parents have always had a lot of stuff going on themselves. So I felt like I couldn't talk about what was going on with me myself. Like I felt like I was putting more on them. So it was almost like I stigmatized and silenced my own self in a lot of ways. They were always very open about emotions and talking about emotions, but I just felt like I was, you know, it was just like too much stress for them.
Felt like you were piling on.
Yeah. So even, you know, so in a way that's stigmatizing and silencing my own self. Yeah. So I think I do that a lot, you know. Yeah.
You know, that's interesting. I saw a lot of heads nodding there. And one of the things that in Hope for the Day's work, you know, even pre-pandemic, when we're in schools, for instance, especially junior high and high school, when we ask students consistently, what's the number one reason you don't talk? People might think, oh, they're afraid of judgment or looking weak, which are consistent things. But it's, at least I'll say for me, in 15 years of mentorship and advocacy, it's always surprising that the most persistent response I hear is not wanting to pile on, not wanting to be a burden to others. And if you looking at our screens, everyone nodded when you shared that, Aaron. And I kind of want to pivot to that. I think that's a perfect way to close down, wind down this part of the conversation, is just who kind of, who felt that? Like, I mean, you all nodded your heads, but who really has caught themselves feeling like, I don't want to be a burden. I can't share this out. And it didn't have to be the people that you're thinking about not being a burden to, could totally be the people who love you and are your team day one, ride or dies. And then somehow, because of that, you put it into your head that that's who you're not going to talk to about. And it's nothing toxic that they did, right? I think it's easy for us to just think that silence is only perpetuated by like a toxic factor. We're not doing ourselves a justice of a true conversation if we don't acknowledge that we can put it into our own heads, not because we're broken or we're idiotic for doing that, but we just, that's a tough nut to crack, to realize that, for the people who care about us and support us, why we say it's okay not to be okay is not just for the general audience and the people outbound. Sometimes the people who need to hear that the most is yourself. And I want to pivot to our judges here. If you have a story you'd like to share, and then we would like to hear some decision making. So I'll start. I don't want to put you judges all on the spot. If you have your hands up, Mike will see that, but not me. But who would like to sort of share some thoughts as we wind down tonight before we talk about our results?
Well, I would like to say, talking about family, so my family comes from Korea, which is, that stereotype of the kind of oppressed East Asian attitude towards mental health is a stereotype for a reason. It's just not a culture where you're open to talk about individualism, let alone your individual mental health. It's difficult. Plus, I grew up my mother's like super Christian. So it's like you've got the religious pressure. Like, why do you have mental health issues? Jesus loves you. On top of like, don't talk about yourself. We don't do that. So it's a lot of pressure there's a lot of levels to learning how to express yourself. But I do have faith in hearing what everybody was saying. And from my own experience, that regardless of how you grow up and the influences around you, there's always a way to find self-expression. And it's really nice when people take advantage of those opportunities around them to find ways to express, even if you didn't grow up that way.
Thank you, Mia. We'll go to Sadie and Skylar. I wanted to give Dave, we haven't heard from you. I don't know if you have any 2 cents you wanted to chip in there.
Yeah, no, this is great. So, I mean, the one thing that I would want to add to this conversation, based on how we started it, and felt such inspiration from the videos from Skylar and Sadie, is what the point of those videos is these are our valves that we're trying to express. And another way of saying that is, this is no matter how hard life fucking gets. This is what we could lose ourselves in, and this is where we can go to, whether and that could even be your work. What is the thing that you love most in this world that you could always turn to and rely on if shit's getting too hard? And the thing that I want to make sure doesn't get lost in that is, obviously at Hope for the Day we've heard a million stories of the people that we've lost, right? So when equal to that conversation of making sure you find that thing that you love most in life that you can turn into your valve, is also making sure that you have a plan B for your valve. Because obviously if it's makeup or baking, that would be really kind of hard to think about, that you might lose that someday. And that would be a scary movie that I would definitely love to see how that happened. But that's possible. And more directly, think of the person who loves to work out obsessively and throws out their back and loses that and then can't do that anymore. Or think about the person who loses themselves in music and is a guitar player, and they get arthritis in their hands, and they lose the thing they love because of something else happens, and they can no longer do that. So I just want to remind everyone, equally important to finding that thing you love and how you valve out, is making sure you have a plan B. And as you talk to your loved ones, making sure that they have a plan B and C, and they fall in love with more than just one thing, is equally important to really identifying that plan A and that plan B. So this is awesome. I love doing this with you all. So thank you.
Thank you so much for those very wise words. And I don't want to rob just a real circle back. Skylar, Sadie, you good? Anything you want to put in? Okay. So let's have some results. I have a drumstick here. Okay, that probably wasn't good. So here's the community poll. And this is our judges poll, Mike?
This is all the votes that have come through from the community.
Okay.
So this is just one thing that our judge panel can consider influencing their positions on who the winner might be. We got pretty clear lead from the community on R.E.D. I'm not surprised. Oh my God, Billy Ray, number 2.
RBG and Billy Ray.
And then we got David Rose, Dracula, and Frog. Pretty nice smattering of votes there from the community. Thanks for everybody participating. And this shit has been so fun.
So that was our online, just folks who are watching and tuning in right now. And now we leave it to our judges. We'll do this with the simple sort of selection count. We're putting you totally on the spot. If you would please like to select your winner, or your pick rather. Starting
Ribbit.
with Mia Park, vote for Ribbit.
We got Mia with 1 vote for the Frog. Yeah.
I feel like I'm gonna have to vote the Frog too, because of the dedication that's going on here.
All right. We have 2 judges with a firm lock on the Frog.
What about the keeper, huh?
Skylar and Dave.
Sounds like it's
I'm
gonna
gonna
come out
have
of
to go with Billy Ray.
Billy Ray.
One
Billy
for Billy
Ray.
Ray.
Got one
Okay.
for Billy Ray. So, let's see here. Let's see
Yeah.
what Dave has to say.
And I'm going to have to go with the people's choice, not just because of the timeliness of our world today, but I think she really looks like, I've never met Nicole in person, but I think she looks dead on, not just the costume. Definitely RBG for me.
Okay, so here's how we're going to do this. We're going to declare Frog overall winner, and then runners up will be RBG and Billy Ray. So, Frog, you've got a $50 gift card coming to you. RBG and Billy Ray, you've got $25 gift cards respectively coming to you. I think that's the only right, that's the right way to do it. All right. For the rest of our guests who dressed up, thank you so much for making this a fun interactive episode. I want to thank our judges panel, our esteemed judges panel, Dave, Sadie, Skylar, and Mia. You are all such gems. And also I want to double back to Skylar and Sadie. Thank you for sharing a part of your platforms.
Of course.
One of the things you can expect from Conversations Cafe as we are weekly, at least through the rest of 2020, and the scheduling may change into 2021, is that we're going to be moving into November after, this week, and you're going to meet more from our intersectional platforms. We're going to be talking with Project R.E.D team in the coming weeks. We're going to be talking about Veterans Day coming up. And in November, we're also going to be focusing quite a lot on moving into a time of giving and giving back to the community. Hope for the Day contributes an intensive amount of its energies to providing education and impact to the community with the lowest barriers possible between access to this mental health education. And so we're going to be trying to close out the year raising more support and awareness, and that means donations. So we're going to be talking about that in coming weeks. But for tonight, I want to thank all of our guests and all of our on-screen participants. More importantly, I also want to thank Rick Osowski, Vicky Cisnet, Mike Van Opel, Macy, and Angel as part of the production team. We could not do this without you. And finally, I want to thank you watching at home or listening in days and weeks after. We do this to help give you education, impact, and inspiration. And as a parting shot, especially when Dave brought up the excellent point about understanding that there could be more than one valve, it is spooky to talk about mental health, but a big reach goal as we go into this Halloween season and into the given season might be to maybe challenge yourself to face a fear, and maybe an activity you could take upon yourself if you're listening or watching right now or in days afterwards is if there's someone that you wanted to start a conversation with, or there's a conversation you feel you needed to have for yourself, we encourage you, whether it's to make that connection and start that conversation with someone in your personal space, a friend, a peer, a coworker, or you feel you need to start that conversation yourself and maybe need help doing it. That's why Hope for the Day exists, to help people start the conversations and find their journeys to a better quality of life. So we encourage you to consider, despite the fears and how spooky it may get, starting that conversation for yourself or someone you care about, because it is okay not to be okay. And I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight and hope you have a wonderful, wonderful, ghoul-tastic weekend. And with that, we're signing off. And thank you. You're all wonderful people. Have a great night.